Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Is this working again? Yeah, okay. Thank you. Thanks for sharing your warm welcomes and greetings. You're invited to continue your conversation after the service during coffee hour. It is a true blessing to be a part of such an engaged community. There are many ways, in addition to greeting each other on Sunday mornings, to take part in the life of our community. Here are a few. Today, during coffee hour, you are invited to join members of our UCM governing board for informal conversation in the fireplace room. All are welcome. There will be a new UU class next Saturday, October 15th, led by Reverend Joan, that focuses on Unitarian Universalist history and theology. Newcomers and anyone interested in becoming a member of the congregation are especially invited to attend. Please RSVP by this Wednesday. You can visit the hospitality table downstairs to RSVP, or you can find the link to the RSVP form in this week's e-news. And mark your calendars for next Sunday's activities fair during coffee hour. You will have a chance to share and learn about the many ways to participate in our ministries and programs. And I think Reverend Joan has something she'd like to tell us about.
Yes, thanks, Del. So today I want to also mention that after coffee hour, we are having the first of our circle suppers, a welcome back potluck that is open to all. And even if you weren't planning to attend and don't have something to bring to the potluck, you are still very much welcome. That'll begin in the vestry as coffee hour concludes. And there will also be a few other circle suppers that you can sign up for later this month. You can visit the hospitality table to learn more about those. And on behalf of the Women's Alliance, I want to share that the rummage sale over the last couple of days was very successful. Many thanks go to all who donated nice items, all of you who worked for several days to set up and then to sell and clean up, and all of you who stopped to shop. Items that were left over were donated to a number of different community groups: Youth Build, Resource, Good Samaritan Haven, Goodwill, Amy's Armour, Cummings Street Residents, the Humane Society, and we're very grateful to the Karen Kitzmiller coat giveaway, who donated many coats to the rummage sale. And we raised a grand total of $2,744.20, which I hear is the highest amount in a number of years. So thank you, everyone.
And please do consult the weekly e-news to learn about the many other opportunities for connecting more deeply within and beyond our congregation. And now, let's take a deep breath, make sure our cell phones are silenced, and enter more deeply into our time of worship with this morning's prelude. And returning for another week is our guest pianist, Stephen Brown.
Thank you, Stephen. These opening words are by Tanya Marquez. It is now, when we are called as witnesses of the world, to mend it, to change its course, to restore it. It is now when we are called to act on our values, not to hide, not to fear, but to be bold and loud. It is now that we are called to continue our fight for justice, to organize, to speak up. It is now. Let us gather. Let us give each other courage. Let us worship together. And let us join now in our opening hymn. It's number 95 in the gray hymnal. There is more love somewhere. And please rise in body or spirit.
Let us now light the chalice, symbol of our Unitarian Universalist faith. This morning, we welcome Kate Spring and Waylon to light the chalice. As they do, I invite you to light a chalice at home if you have one nearby. We light this flame, an enduring symbol of our collective commitment to lead with truth and compassion. And now, let us join our voices in saying these words of affirmation, adapted from L. Griswold Williams. Love is the doctrine of this church. The quest for truth is its sacrament, and service is its prayer. To dwell together in peace, to seek knowledge in freedom, to serve human need, to the end that all souls shall grow into harmony with the divine. Thus do we covenant.
At this time, I would like to invite all children or children at heart to come up to the chancel to join me for a story for all ages. Good morning. Can you hear me? Yes. I'm going to tell you a story today about someone named Florence Price. Has anyone heard of her before? I think I see 3 hands, 4 hands maybe. Not very many of us. Well, in 2009, which is a little over 10 years ago, a couple bought an old house in Chicago, and in the attic, they found over, I think, 300 or something like that, pages of sheet music, like the kind that someone playing the piano might use, and it was all yellowed. And every piece was written by the same woman, Florence Price. Who is Florence Price, they wondered. Well, Florence Price was born in Little Rock, Arkansas in 1887. So that's like maybe your grandparents' grandparents were alive then. So that's a pretty long time ago. And that was a time of deep racial segregation and divides. And her skin color was not the same as many of the composers that she had heard of and knew, like Bach and Mozart and all these white men that had written music before her time even. And her mom, though, was a music teacher and taught other things too, and taught her how to play piano. And she wondered, could she, as a girl, learn to play music and write music like all of these famous composers? Well, by the time she was 4 years old, she had her first piano recital, and by the time she was 11, she already had her first piece of music published. And then she started entering her music into competitions, and in 1933, so maybe your grandparents' parents were alive by then, the Chicago Symphony Orchestra performed a brand new piece of music. They didn't know who had written it. It had just won this competition. And who do you think had written it? Florence Price. It turned out that Florence Price had written it, and this famous orchestra didn't know that a woman of color had written the music until after they'd performed it. And she won first prize. And despite her being so talented and so motivated to writing all this music and doing all this music, she and playing, performing music, most people in her day and age, her time, wouldn't accept her music. They wouldn't play it, they wouldn't promote it because of racism. And so as she got older, she continued playing music and she continued writing music, but nobody learned her name and nobody continued to play it. And then back to 2009, when the people started discovering all of this music that was left in an attic, it turned out that people were now ready to play her music and to come to know who she was. And she was, in her own right, incredibly talented. So this month, we're going to have an opportunity to hear some of the music of Florence Price, who had the courage to listen to the gifts that she had inside of herself and honor them even when other people wouldn't. So at this time, I'm going to invite the congregation to join in singing the parting song. And all children are welcome to join me. We'll go out through that door back there and go to the children's chapel for some activities. And then I invite parents and caregivers of said children to come after the service and pick your kids up. All right, Please join in singing as you go.
Thank you. Reverend Joan asked me if I would be willing to share something today about my experience as a member of our racial justice group, working in support of passing Proposal 2, the constitutional amendment to abolish slavery. When I thought about it, and this month's theme of courage, this poem came to my mind. It is by Naomi Shihab Nye, and it's called Cross That Line. Paul Robeson stood on the northern border of the USA and sang into Canada, where a vast audience sat on folding chairs waiting to hear him. He sang into Canada. His voice left the USA when his body was not allowed to cross that line. Remind us again, brave friend, what other countries can we sing into? What lines should we all be crossing? What songs travel toward us from far away to deepen our days? I've loved that poem ever since I first heard it, and I'm finding that the older I get, the more I feel determined to push myself to cross lines that I may have been avoiding, including the lines of my own comfort zone. So, some of you may have noticed the t-shirt I'm wearing today. And some of you might even have wondered if I had forgotten to put on my church clothes this morning. But no. I've been a part of an anti-racism book group for the past year. And a couple weeks ago, we were each working on making commitment statements about what we'll do to continue forward in our work. And the thought occurred to me that I've worn this t-shirt to do tabling for Prop 2 at the farmer's market several times, but I was taking it off as I left the market. And I wasn't wearing it anywhere else. I didn't want to draw attention to myself. It made me uncomfortable to imagine walking down the sidewalk or into a store or into a gathering out in my town of Worcester wearing this very noticeable message: abolish slavery, Vermont. What would people think? All of a sudden, I realized that that was the point. What would they think? And why would I want to avoid finding out? So I made a commitment to wear it out into the world. When I do, I feel a little self-conscious. I feel it in my body, a rush of energy, some tightness and quavering in my lungs, my heart beginning to speed up and thump, 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 thump. It is kind of uncomfortable. But you know, it has opened up some conversations that I wouldn't have had otherwise. There are a lot of people who don't know anything about Prop 2, and some people have asked me about it. And spoiler alert, they've expressed interest in hearing about it. How about that? These are the conversations I've been wanting to have. So, pushing myself out of my comfort zone on behalf of things I care deeply about. Prop 2 is one of those things, and there are so many more. And that's what I want to do. That's what I want to find the courage to do every day. That's what I want to encourage myself to do more and more. I care, so I can push myself out of my comfort zone. Remind us again, brave friend, what lines should we all be crossing? The act of giving is a spiritual practice as important as any other element in our shared time of worship. Our generosity is a form of love. Our gifts freely given help us to practice Unitarian Universalism within and beyond our congregation. We want you to know that in lieu of today's usual community pouch collection, this morning we will be dedicating 100% of today's cash offerings to the UUA Disaster Relief Fund. In the wake of Hurricane Ian, the Unitarian Universalist Association is administering recovery grants to UU congregations in Florida and any other congregations in Ian's path. In the days or weeks before FEMA aid or other flood insurance reaches those in need. Today, we join other UU congregations in pooling our resources to assist in this time of disaster. If you wish to contribute by check to this special collection, please write disaster relief in the memo line. You can find the offering pouch, as most of you have already done, at the end of each pew on the side aisles. Please pass them toward the center aisle. You can also make a financial contribution by donating online. We are so grateful to each and every one of you for your generosity in its many forms. Your offering will now be gratefully received. And today's musical offering is from Heather Maas and, thank you, Lindsay Wade. Thank you.
I wish, is the sound on? I wish it is. Okay. I wish I knew how it would feel to be free. I wish I could break all those chains holding me. I wish I could say all the things that I should say, and say them loud and say them clear for the whole wide world to hear. I wish I could share all the love that's in my heart, remove all the bars that keep us apart. I wish you what it means to be me, then you'd sing and agree that everybody should be free. I wish I could give all I'm longing to give. I wish I could live like I'm longing to live. I wish I could do all the things I know I can do. You know, it's way overdue. I'll be starting anew. Well, I wish I could be like a bird in the sky. How sweet it would be if I found I could fly. I'd soar to the sun and look down at the sea, and I'd sing 'cause I'd know, yeah, I'd sing 'cause I'd know, I'd sing 'cause I'd know how it feels to be free.
Beautiful. Thank you, Lindsay and Heather. We take a moment to acknowledge the generosity with which your financial gifts have been freely and lovingly offered this morning, and we receive them with deep gratitude for the difference that they allow us to make for one another here in our church community and well beyond. Thank you all. I invite you into this time of meditation and prayer, and I don't usually start this way, but I'm just sensing a little bit of some kind of anxiety or agitation, like things are just a little bit different. There's the air is blowing and the masks are being worn and we're wondering if we can hear one another. And so I just invite you to, if that is a feeling you're having, to maybe just find a way to roll your shoulders out, or you might even want to rise and just take a little swing of your arms. Do a little something to get that feeling moving in your body. Thank you, Del, for speaking to how often these things can be in our bodies and we don't even totally quite notice. And then just allow yourself to settle in. Yeah. Take a nice audible breath if you wish. In this time of meditation and prayer each week, we call ourselves into presence, into a time of attuning to our hearts, to our bodies, to our spirits, knowing that that is all connected. So I invite you to take a moment to become more present in yourself. To all that you are holding in mind, on your heart, in your body. All the cares, all the loves, all the griefs that are with you, present with you in this moment. And let us know that we are not alone, but connected in community with all that we hold in this caring, loving community. And that many of the troubles that we might feel are also felt by others here and beyond. I want to remind you that we have each week a member of our lay pastoral care team present to offer a listening ear if that is something you would find helpful. Today we have Art Stuckey, who is up here in the front of the sanctuary. You are welcome to seek him out later. And let us just take another breath in and out. I share with you these words for meditation by Maureen Kaloran. I pray this day for the courage to be humble in the face of inequity and pain, to know that the power has been given me to make a difference, although not to end all suffering or to save all the whales that populate our days. I pray for the courage of endurance to keep acting in the midst of despair, to keep trying in the aftermath of failure, to keep hoping in the emptiness that follows loss or change. May courage give me patience, and may I ever know love's healing presence at the heart and center of my days. And let us join now in a time of quiet meditation together. Our reading this morning is an excerpt from the 1852 sermon by Theodore Parker called Of Justice and Conscience. And this sermon spoke to the religious and moral origins of the liberal Christian commitment to justice and the relevance of that word, justice, on the immoralities of his day. He said, "We, all of us, have this ideal. Our dream is fairer than our day. We will not let it go. If the wicked prosper, it is but for a moment, say we. The counsel of the forward shall be carried headlong. What an ideal democracy now floats before the eyes of earnest and religious men, fairer than the Republic of Plato, or More's Utopia, or the golden age of fabled memory. It is justice that we want to organize, justice for all, rich and poor. There the slave shall be free from his master. There shall be no want, no oppression, no fear of man, no fear of God, but only love. I do not pretend to understand the moral universe. The arc is a long one. My eye reaches but little ways. I cannot calculate the curve and complete the figure by the experience of sight. I can divine it by conscience. But from what I see, I am sure it bends towards justice." By the time that our religious ancestor, Theodore Parker, spoke these words, he had already become known as a fervent abolitionist. A decade prior, he had called slavery the great sin of the nation. And just 2 years before this sermon, he had called for non-compliance with the Fugitive Slave Act of 1850. Parker walked the talk, befriending and helping William and Ellen Craft, who had escaped from bondage in Georgia and arrived in Boston in 1848. The Craft story is an incredible one. They had escaped by taking advantage of Ellen's light skin to disguise her as a young white man who was traveling with his slave. And they thought through every detail of this plan, including the fact that they might have to sign their name in the guest registry of any lodgings where they might stay. And as it was illegal for the enslaved peoples to learn how to read or to write, that was not something they'd be able to do. So they thought of bandaging up Ellen's arm so it looked like she had an injury, and to say that they were traveling north for her to get medical attention. And if needed, they could ask someone else to sign the register for her. When they arrived in Boston after 4 nerve-wracking days of travel, they were hailed as heroes by the abolitionists in the city. They went on a speaking tour and then became integrated into the community of free blacks in Boston. Ellen became a seamstress and William a cabinet maker. But then came 1850. The Fugitive Slave Act was written into law, signed by President Millard Fillmore, a Unitarian, and the Crafts' lives were in jeopardy. Within a month, 2 agents had arrived to Boston looking for them. William Craft sought refuge with a friend, another black activist, and Ellen went into hiding in the home of Theodore Parker. It is said that for the next 2 weeks, Parker wrote his sermons with a sword in the open drawer under his inkstand and a pistol in the flap of the desk. Abolitionists were able to keep the Crafts safe long enough for them to flee to Nova Scotia, where they then boarded a ship for England. They lived there for 17 years, had 5 children, and then after the Civil War, returned to Georgia, where they established a school for freed slaves. Theodore Parker, though he could not see the exact curvature of the moral universe's arc, he played a role in moving it ever closer to the justice of God that was a guiding force for his activism and ministry. About 100 years later, the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. paraphrased Theodore Parker's words in such a way that King's words have reverberated in the struggle for freedom for the last 60-plus years. Some of you, I'm sure, can say it with me. The arc of the moral universe is long, but it bends towards justice. These words have inspired millions of people to take up the cause of freedom and equality, a cause that continues today. Though we may wonder at times exactly which way that arc is bending. Our own religious history includes figures who were doing all they could to courageously shift the scales towards more just outcomes for all, as well as those whose actions kept oppressive systems in place for far too long, and in particular, the institution of slavery. President Millard Fillmore, who I mentioned earlier, was a Unitarian. He helped to establish a Unitarian church in Buffalo, New York. In signing the Fugitive Slave Law, and as a law, he said, "God knows that I detest slavery, but it is an existing evil for which we are not responsible, and we must endure it and give it such protection as is guaranteed by the Constitution till we can get rid of it without destroying the last hope of free government in the world." Of course, the Civil War would be fought testing the endurance of our free government. But despite the outcome of that war, slavery has never been entirely abolished from this free land. The arc bends, but has not yet reached its final destination. Most of us have only learned a partial history. As a relatively new Vermonter, I had been told repeatedly that Vermont was the first state to abolish slavery. How many of you were told that over the years? Most hands are raised. Vermont was indeed the first state to address slavery in its constitution, and in doing so abolished the enslavement and indentured servitude of adults 21 years of age and older, but allowed it for the repayment of debts and fines, as well as in the case of an individual giving their so-called consent to being bound in this way to another. And while slavery was abolished with these exceptions, the practice still continued into at least the mid-19th century. The historian Elise Guyette reports that in 1830, 1/5 of Vermont's Black servants were 9 years old or under. 2/3 of them were girls. 34 youngsters under 11 toiled in white households in 1840. These children were generally the only Blacks living in their households. Black adults were also enslaved throughout the state, some by well-known and well-regarded Vermont families. Their names were Dinah and Harriet and Pompey, and so many others whose names are not known. Despite what was written in the Constitution, Vermont was not free of slavery or servitude after 1777. In this coming general election, voters of Vermont have a chance to address this part of Vermont state history and the language in the state's foundational document, a document that continues to shape our lives today. Proposal 2 is a proposed amendment to Article 1 of the Vermont State Constitution, which addresses slavery. The amendment has already passed through the Vermont legislature twice and is now needing the approval by Vermont voters to ratify the amendment. This article of the Constitution would be amended to replace the existing statement on slavery, including the exceptions, with the following: slavery and indentured servitude in any form are prohibited. Vermont joins with 4 other states this election year in seeking to abolish slavery with no exceptions in their state constitutions. These are Tennessee, Oregon, Alabama, and Louisiana. In the movement for abolition, we are being called the Freedom Five. 4 other states have already passed such measures: Rhode Island, Nebraska, Utah, and Colorado. And you might wonder, who will this amendment actually impact? There haven't been slaves in Vermont since at least the mid-19th century, you might think. While that is true, the legacy of slavery in Vermont has continued to have reverberating impacts. For example, in the mid-19th century, census data shows that Blacks living in Vermont were disproportionately working in low-wage jobs and in domestic work compared to whites. Because of a lack of accumulated wealth, as well as discrimination, Blacks were far less likely to own farms, despite having the knowledge and the skills of farm work, much of that gained in servitude and enslavement. And we have all lived with the enduring moral and ethical impact of living with an incomplete vision of Vermont's place in bending that arc. This amendment affects us all, and especially those who have lived with the legacy of slavery in our country and in our state. As Vermonters, we have an opportunity to make a clear statement of our values as a community, to be unambiguous in our belief that all people are equal. As Unitarian and Universalists, we can make clear our affirmation of our first principle, the inherent worth and dignity of every person, and our 6th principle, the goal of world community with peace, liberty, and justice for all. And then there's the opportunity to live out the 8th principle of Unitarian Universalism, which we adopted as a congregation this past February. With this principle, we covenant to affirm and promote journeying towards spiritual wholeness by working to build a diverse, multicultural, beloved community, by our actions that accountably dismantle racism and other oppressions in ourselves and our institutions. Abolishing slavery from Vermont's Constitution for good is just one essential part of addressing the ongoing systems and policies that continue to lead to racial inequity and injustice. Our work is to become better educated about the full history and legacy of slavery in Vermont, to seek to understand how that legacy continues to impact Vermonters of all races, and especially descendants of slaves today. Building a diverse, multicultural, beloved community encompasses much more than a single vote. We must continue to work towards ensuring that all people can live with freedom and dignity, and eliminating those barriers that make it especially difficult for Black, Indigenous, and people of color to do so. Theodore Parker and other abolitionists of his time took up the task at hand, not knowing where it would lead, and likely not imagining that 170 years later, we would be taking up the work of abolition in our time. But indeed, that is the work before us. And if you're thinking that this amendment will surely be approved by Vermont voters, know that a similar sentiment was in the air when Colorado first attempted to make this change in 2016. The measure failed, but then was reintroduced and passed 2 years later. The arc bends, but not always in a single direction. Members of UCM's Racial Justice Group have participated in the Abolish Slavery Vermont campaign, which is organized by Vermont Interfaith Action and the Vermont Racial Justice Alliance, committing to talk with friends, with family, with fellow church members, neighbors, and strangers about Prop 2. And I hope that you will start there with a conversation with one of the members of our racial justice group to learn more. And if you are already certain of your support for the ratification of this proposed change to the Constitution, I ask, what is the next courageous action that you will take? The Black Unitarian poet and abolitionist, Frances Ellens Watkins Harper, wrote, "I ask no monument proud and high to arrest the gaze of passers-by. All that my yearning spirit craves is bury me not in a land of slaves." Let us honor the legacy of our abolitionist ancestors today. Let us be a part of continuing to bend the arc closer and closer to justice and to ensuring that this is a land free for all. May we, the people of Vermont, declare with a resounding voice our commitment to human freedom and dignity here and now. So may it be. And I invite you to join now in our final hymn. We will be singing Amazing Grace, which is number 205 in the Gray Hymnal. It was written by John Newton, a slave trader who became an outspoken opponent of slavery. Please rise in body or spirit. As we close our service, we extinguish our chalice, carrying with us into the days and the week ahead its flame of truth, the warmth of community, and the spark of hope. As we do so, let us say together our mission statement printed in the order of service. We welcome all as we build a loving community to nurture each person's spiritual journey, serve human need, and protect the earth, our home. These closing words are from Cornel West. We need the courage to question the powers that be, the courage to be impatient with evil and patient with people, the courage to fight for social justice. In many instances, we will be stepping out on nothing and just hoping to land on something, but that's the struggle. To live is to wrestle with despair, yet never allow despair to have the last word. And we conclude our service with the postlude.